Freeze everything you are doing right now, because what just got stamped into the release calendar is not a rumor, not a leak, not some Reddit thread stitched together at 2 in the morning. This is a confirmed, dated, receipted detonation, and it is pointed directly at the last standing tower of the OVO empire. Kendrick Lamar is officially locked onto a record called How to Pray, the centerpiece of DJ Dahi's debut album Black Boy Alternative, landing August 28, 2026, with Amber Mark riding shotgun on the same track. And if you think this is just another guest verse, you have not been watching a single move Kendrick Lamar has made for the last 24 months. Hit that like button right now and stay glued to the screen, because by the time I finish laying out the board, you are going to understand that what arrives on August 28th is not a song. It is a sentence. And somewhere in Toronto, a legal team is staring at the exact same calendar you are, slowly realizing they brought a box of appeal paperwork to a fireworks factory. Let me slow this down for a second, because the weight of this feature has almost nothing to do with 16 bars. This is a flare fired over the entire industry. DJ Dahi is not some random producer Kendrick Lamar bumped into at a listening party. DJ Dahi is the craftsman who helped weld the skeleton of money trees. DJ Dahi is the pulse running underneath Father Time. When Kendrick Lamar decides to reunite with the exact architect who built his most bulletproof records, that is not a nostalgia lap around the old neighborhood. That is a general reopening the weapons locker. That is Kendrick Lamar announcing, without saying a single word, that the machine which devoured the last era of rap is being oiled, loaded, and rolled back out for a second campaign. And meanwhile, Drake is on his third album of the calendar year like he is farming attendance certificates, while one Kendrick Lamar project parked itself at the top of the charts for 22 consecutive weeks. The scoreboard is not close. The scoreboard is humiliating. And every veteran in this business with 2 working ears is already murmuring that the next Kendrick Lamar move is going to make the last 12 months of Toronto output look like a soundcheck for a show that got cancelled. Now peep how this rollout actually ignited, because this is where the discipline shows. The first preview of How to Pray surfaced on July 20th, when Donald Glover's Gilga radio platform premiered a snippet that tore through hip-hop Twitter in under 30 minutes. That snippet did exactly what a Kendrick Lamar rollout is engineered to do. It kidnapped a dead summer news cycle. It colonized every timeline in the culture. And it forced the entire industry to stop what it was doing and face Compton, while Drake was still upstairs litigating in Toronto. Every single step Kendrick Lamar has taken over the last year has been cut with the precision of a man who measures twice and buries you once. And this DJ Dahi reunion is the sharpest blade he has pulled from the drawer yet. Understand something. This is not coincidence. This is a countdown clock. When that timer hits 0 on August 28th, the shockwave touches every corner of the genre, and the fingerprints Kendrick Lamar has pressed all over this rollout are so deliberate, so sequenced, so surgical, that only a rap scientist of his caliber could have arranged them in this exact order. And you want to know why Drake looks so rattled this summer? Because Kendrick Lamar has dug a competitive moat around his entire operation that the rest of hip-hop cannot structurally cross. Kendrick Lamar owns the touring record. Kendrick Lamar owns the chart column. Kendrick Lamar owns the cultural conversation. GNX landed on November 24th, 2024, and it held the summit of the Billboard 200 for 22 straight weeks, and it did that with zero traditional marketing. No radio campaign. No morning show circuit. No glossy magazine cover blitz. Kendrick Lamar simply released the thing, and the culture fell in line like gravity had spoken. That is the definition of a superstar who does not chase the algorithm, because the algorithm chases him. Drake, on the other side of the fence, is watching every drop debut loud and die quiet. Every Iceman single arrives with fireworks and evaporates off the new music radar inside a week. Kendrick Lamar does not chase a debut week. Kendrick Lamar chases a decade. And that patience is exactly why GNX is still moving units deep into its second year of life, while the other camp cannot keep a song on the charts long enough for the plaque paint to dry. But hold on, because this next layer is where the whole theory snaps into place. Rewind the tape to the 2026 Grammy Awards and freeze the frame on Kendrick Lamar's right hand. What are you looking at? Gauze. Tape. Boxing reps. Not a watch. Not a bracelet. Not some stylist's idea of a red carpet risk. Fight wraps. The exact equipment a boxer laces on before walking into a war. And in case anybody tried to shrug that off as a wardrobe coincidence, Dave Free, the longtime creative partner and PG Lang co-founder, resurrected a dormant Instagram account for the sole purpose of posting a close-up photograph of that very rap. Dave Free does not disappear from social media for an entire season and then reboot his page to show off an outfit. That was a signal flare fired straight into the night sky, and every rap scholar with a functioning eye caught it in real time. The defensive chapter is closed. The offensive chapter is open. Kendrick Lamar is climbing through the ropes and Drake is still wandering the arena looking for his corner. The referee has already started the count, and only one fighter is actually throwing leather. Now rewind once more to April 16, 2026, when DJ Akademiks reported that Kendrick Lamar has a full project sitting in the vault, and that this project is engineered specifically to bulldoze the rollout of Drake's upcoming record Iceman. If history has taught this culture anything about how Kendrick Lamar operates, the man does not telegraph a drop. He does not announce a date on a podcast circuit. Kendrick Lamar detonates. He runs the surprise blueprint that has flattened every rival who ever stood across from him, and the industry has never once figured out how to defend against it. Those hand wraps at the 2026 Grammys were not a costume decision. They were a written warning that Kendrick Lamar is timing his next strike to land before Iceman even leaves the loading dock. Every executive with a working inbox understood what that gauze meant the moment the photos hit. And look at what that same Grammy night actually produced, because the symbolism is almost rude. Kendrick Lamar walked out of that building carrying 5 golden gramophones. 5. Drake walked out with 0 trophies and a fresh stack of legal filings. That is not a rough evening. That is a civilizational gap. One man is operating like a champion in camp, sharpening for a title defense. The other is operating like a defendant refreshing court databases at 3 in the morning, wondering which arbitrator drew his case. Since May of 2024, Drake has released a joint album with Party Next Door, leaked a conveyor belt of Iceman singles, and spent his summer inside courtrooms trying to resuscitate a defamation suit against Universal Music Group that a federal judge already threw in the trash. As of this month, August 2026, the OVO camp is drafting desperate appeals and wading through the wreckage of the Stake U.S. Spot Farm case, a fight that got punted into arbitration on July 30th. The dust cloud of panic hanging over the six is so thick that not even a high-budget Kick stream can fan it away. On August 9th, Drake logged onto Kick to address the Rock Nation subpoenas head-on, and he tried to sell the audience on the idea that his pen is still loaded. Go watch that clip again. It does not read like confidence. It reads like a man shouting through a chain-link fence at a lion that left the yard 10 minutes ago. Drop your verdict in the comments right now. Is Drake still inside the culture, or has Kendrick Lamar already served the eviction papers with the signature still wet? Smash that like button and ride with me, because we have not even reached the receipt that changes the shape of this entire story. Because the fourth piece of this puzzle is not a chart position or a court document. It is a moment Kendrick Lamar handed the culture like a torch. While Drake was crashing out on a live stream in what looked like a basement studio, voice tight, patience gone, Kendrick Lamar was constructing the exact opposite kind of headline. On July 31st, Kendrick Lamar carved time out of his day to surprise a 7-year-old fan named Romo Fraser Jr. with a FaceTime call. Not a photo op. Not a sponsored appearance. Not a marketing stunt cooked up in a PR war room. A FaceTime call. That single interaction reminded the entire internet why Kendrick Lamar is treated as the people's champion, the Compton architect, the West Coast surgeon who never forgot who the music is for. One man is chasing courtroom wins to rescue a reputation. The other is building legacy moments that no legal team and no bot farm on this planet can manufacture. That one FaceTime clip has done more organic marketing for the Kendrick Lamar brand than any Billboard OVO money could ever buy. Every parent who watched that clip added Kendrick Lamar to the family playlist. Every kid who watched it found a new hero. That is legacy labor. That is the divide this culture is witnessing in real time. Now let's talk about the long game, because Kendrick Lamar has always been a patient perfectionist, and nothing proves it like the current status of his film project Whitney Springs. That movie was pulled from the release calendar back in November of 2025, and every casual observer stamped it as a graveyard project. It is not a graveyard project. It is a living, breathing, active production as of June 2026. Any other artist with a delay like that on the resume would look like a walking crisis. For Kendrick Lamar, every extra month is evidence that he refuses to serve the audience anything that has not been polished to a mirror shine. Kendrick Lamar is not chasing a release date. Kendrick Lamar is chasing a standard. Flip the tape and look at the other side. Drake's recent output feels rushed, reactive, and padded with filler. The Iceman singles keep dripping out like a busted faucet, and the tracklist keeps ballooning like it is trying to purchase relevance in bulk. Two different philosophies. Two different universes. One of them compounds. The other one leaks. And zoom out, because what Kendrick Lamar is assembling is not an album cycle. It is an empire with departments. PG Lang is the parent operation. Whitney Springs is the film division. GNX was the sonic anchor. The Super Bowl was the global spotlight. Every piece is stitched together like an actual corporation, not a mixtape run with a merch table. Run the numbers on Coachella 2027 while we are here. Prediction markets are already floating a 17% probability that Kendrick Lamar headlines alongside SZA. 17% might sound modest on paper until you remember the context. Kendrick Lamar is walking off a Super Bowl 59 halftime performance that pulled 133.5 million viewers, a broadcast figure most stadium acts will never touch in an entire career. Drake, meanwhile, is trying to pivot toward the 2026 World Cup to secure a global stage of his own, and the whole maneuver reads less like ambition and more like a man trying to teleport back to the 2016 version of himself. That version is gone. That version got left behind the day, not like us landed on radio and never left. Stay locked in, because here is where the calendar turns into a weapon. Insiders around the Compton camp are quietly hinting that August 28th is not just an album date on DJ Dahi's schedule. They're hinting it could double as the ignition of a broader multi-single campaign stretching through September, October, and November. That would drop a Kendrick Lamar offensive directly on top of the fourth quarter window Drake has been protecting for Iceman. That is not a scheduling conflict. That is a scheduling ambush. Kendrick Lamar is not merely appearing on a feature. Kendrick Lamar is booking the entire Q4 calendar under his own name. Every playlist editor, every radio programmer, every algorithm curator on every platform is about to be forced to pick which side of the calendar deserves priority. And the market has already answered that question. Kendrick Lamar is the only name in this genre that guarantees an engagement spike right now, and the platforms are quietly rearranging their promotional real estate around that reality. There is a reason Kendrick Lamar chose a title like How to Pray for the record he is anchoring. This is a man who does not invoke the spiritual casually. This is a man who has quoted scripture inside verses that ended careers. Every song title inside a Kendrick Lamar rollout is a message, and every message is aimed with sniper discipline. How to Pray is already being read across hip-hop forums as a dispatch addressed straight to Toronto. A message saying the appeals will not work. A message saying the bot farms will not save anybody. A message saying the only strategy left in that camp is a spiritual one, and even that ledger is not going to balance in their favor. Embedding that message inside another artist's debut album is precisely the chess move that turns DJ Dahi's rollout into a Trojan horse carrying a heavyweight verse. And peep the alignment, because DJ Dahi has never publicly picked a side in any rap conflict. But the moment DJ Dahi lets Kendrick Lamar anchor his debut album, that alignment becomes public record. DJ Dahi is telling the industry which corner of the ring he is standing in. And it is not the Toronto corner. Do not sleep on Amber Mark either, because her presence on this record is design, not decoration. Amber Mark is a rising artist whose stock is going to detonate the second this feature lands, and that too is intentional. Kendrick Lamar does not just win battles. Kendrick Lamar builds a bench. Every artist Kendrick Lamar touches gets bigger the morning after the collaboration drops. Drake used to own that exact power. Drake used to be the cosign king, the man whose feature list minted careers. Go look at his recent features. Go look at the diminishing returns. The cosign engine on the Toronto side is coughing black smoke, and every rising artist who used to book studio time with Drake first is now quietly emailing Compton. That migration is the real story of this era, and it is happening entirely in silence, which is exactly how Kendrick Lamar prefers it. Now peep the psychology, because this boxing era Kendrick Lamar has embraced is not a marketing costume. Kendrick Lamar has been threading boxing language through his music since Euphoria back in 2024. Kendrick Lamar name-dropped Terrence Crawford on that record for a reason. Terrence Crawford is a technician. Terrence Crawford is precise. Terrence Crawford does not waste a single punch. Kendrick Lamar identifies with fighters who study the tape, who map the rounds, who close the show with one clean shot instead of spraying wild haymakers into the dark. Drake, by contrast, is fighting like a brawler who lost his footwork 3 fights ago. Drake is hurling legal filings, PR statements, and live stream monologues into empty air, hoping one of them connects with anything. And the tape does not lie. One camp is running drills. The other camp is running out of ideas. Circle the Grammy sweep one more time, because it was not a coincidence of taste. That sweep was the industry publicly bending the knee. 5 trophies is a coronation. 0 trophies is an eviction notice. And when the establishment hands you a coronation on the same night it hands your rival an eviction, you do not need to write a single bar about it. The receipts speak on their own. Kendrick Lamar walked off that stage carrying the crown, and every camera in the building understood who had lost the throne. Even the presenters looked at Kendrick Lamar with a species of reverence you cannot rehearse. That night is going to be frozen in the culture's memory the way title fights get frozen, and the hand wraps are the frame everybody is going to remember first. And while we are talking about what Kendrick Lamar is building, understand that the Whitney Springs film is going to be a genuine event when it finally arrives. Even the delay is strategy. Kendrick Lamar has been on record about wanting to construct cinematic work that outlives streaming trends, and Whitney Springs is the beachhead of that ambition. The PG Lang Creative Brain Trust has been shaping that project like a master filmmaker's set piece. Nothing rushed. Nothing compromised. When that film lands, it will not be reviewed like a rapper's vanity project. It will be reviewed like cinema. That distinction alone is worth a fortune in cultural capital. Now compare that to Drake's screen ambitions, which have mostly amounted to music video content that reads like output from a content farm. Drake is on his 3rd album of the year, and not one of them has generated the sustained conversation that a single Kendrick Lamar release generates in 24 hours. Drake is competing on volume. Kendrick Lamar is competing on gravity. And in the long game of this genre, gravity beats volume every single time. Volume buys you a week. Gravity buys you a decade. Peep this detail too, because it is compounding quietly underneath everything else. The bot farm lawsuit is still active. The Stake US dispute is still grinding through arbitration. The Universal Music Group appeal is still being drafted somewhere in a Toronto law office. Every one of those legal fronts is bleeding hours out of Drake's calendar. And every hour Drake spends inside litigation is an hour Kendrick Lamar spends inside a studio. That imbalance compounds like interest on a debt one side refuses to acknowledge. By the time Drake finishes reading discovery documents, Kendrick Lamar has cut 3 verses, linked with DJ Dahi, laid a hook, and boarded a flight to Los Angeles to walk the Whitney Springs set. This is not 2 artists sharing one schedule. This is 2 artists inhabiting 2 different universes. One universe is a courtroom. The other universe is a cathedral of records. And back to the receipts, because the Roc Nation subpoena situation is going to get uglier before it heals. When Roc Nation is subpoenaing people connected to your operation, you're not in a rap beef anymore. You are in a corporate liability storm. And Roc Nation does not step into the sandbox with anyone it does not take seriously. Every insider adjacent to that situation has whispered the same phrase all summer. Drake miscalculated. Drake misread the room. Drake pulled a lever assuming the industry would rally behind him, and the industry looked out the window. The silence surrounding Drake right now is louder than any diss record anyone could ever write about him. Meanwhile, Kendrick Lamar is being celebrated in every corner of the culture that actually matters. Compton is painting murals. Los Angeles radio is spinning GNX cuts on a permanent loop. High school kids in New York are quoting "Not Like Us" like it is scripture. Universities are teaching Kendrick Lamar inside poetry seminars. That is not a rapper. That is a movement. And a movement cannot be sued in federal court. A movement cannot be subpoenaed. A movement cannot be silenced by a rival's PR firm. Now watch this, because the velocity matters. When Kendrick Lamar released Not Like Us in May of 2024, absolutely nobody predicted that a single record would become a Super Bowl anthem within 9 months. That is historic velocity. That is a song moving at cultural light speed. And Kendrick Lamar treated that entire phenomenon as an opening act rather than a peak. An opening act. Because the actual peak Kendrick Lamar is constructing is the compound peak, the multi-year peak, the peak that stretches across the film, the label, the tour, the partnerships, and the awards simultaneously. Kendrick Lamar is not chasing a moment. Kendrick Lamar is engineering an era. That is the fundamental separator between these 2 men right now. Drake operates in moments. Kendrick Lamar operates in eras. Moments fade. Eras get named after the artist who defined them. And when the historians write about the middle of this decade, they will not call it the Drake era. They will call it the Kendrick Lamar era. That is already carved into the stone. Circle this Credential stack as well, because it recalibrates the entire conversation. Kendrick Lamar has quietly become the first artist since the golden age to hold multiple Grammys, an Emmy, and a Pulitzer at the same time. That combination is not a rap achievement. That is a literature achievement. That is a cinema achievement. That is a poetry achievement. Kendrick Lamar has crossed into the pantheon of American art in a way almost no living musician has ever crossed. Bob Dylan lives in that room. Kendrick Lamar lives in that room. Drake has never been anywhere near that room, and deep down, everybody arguing about it online already knows it. And that credibility canyon is exactly why Drake's legal strategy keeps collapsing. When you sue a music company for defamation, you're arguing that a rival damaged your standing. But a federal judge examined that filing and dismissed it because standing has to exist before anyone can defame it. That implication is buried inside the court order, and every hip-hop head who read the ruling caught the subtext instantly. The court essentially told Drake his position in the culture was not elevated enough to sustain the claim. That kind of loss echoes through a rapper's biography for a decade. Meanwhile, Kendrick Lamar is stacking legal victories by simply refusing to engage. Kendrick Lamar has not filed a single lawsuit connected to this era. Kendrick Lamar has not fired off a single cease and desist. Kendrick Lamar has not posted one public complaint about the industry. Kendrick Lamar makes the records, collects the trophies, and stays silent. And that silence is deafening, because in this genre, the loudest voice in the room is almost always the weakest fighter in it. Kendrick Lamar knows that law of the jungle. Kendrick Lamar is playing psychology at an altitude Drake cannot even reach with a ladder. Now hold everything, because there is one more expansion lane the timeline demands we cover. Look at how Kendrick Lamar has quietly absorbed the fashion side of the culture. Look at the Louis Vuitton runway moment. Look at the Martine Rose show appearance. Kendrick Lamar has been building an aesthetic footprint that carries his name into rooms Drake has been trying to purchase entry into for a decade. Drake tried to force his way into high fashion with money. Kendrick Lamar walked through the front door carrying credibility. That distinction is why the luxury houses that used to send Drake the priority invitations are now addressing them to Compton first. And while we are on expansion, do not overlook the PG-Lang publishing arm. Kendrick Lamar is quietly stepping toward book deals, documentary projects, and long-form editorial partnerships that stretch the brand into rooms no rapper has ever entered. Drake tried a book once, and the internet converted it into a meme inside 24 hours. Kendrick Lamar has not even announced anything, and major editorial institutions have been circling the PG-Lang office for 6 months. Kendrick Lamar is studied. Drake is streamed. Only one of those descriptions survives the decade. Now circle back to the streets, because the streets are where all of this ultimately gets decided. Every barbershop in Compton is playing Kendrick Lamar. Every corner in Watts is playing Kendrick Lamar. Every lowrider cruising Crenshaw is pushing Kendrick Lamar through the speakers. Every storefront in Long Beach is leaking GNX out the front door. That is not a marketing budget producing that sound. That is a cultural inheritance being claimed in real time. Drake has never owned that kind of street penetration outside of Toronto, and even inside Toronto, the whispers are growing that the OVO grip is slipping on its own home concrete. And back to the receipts one more time, because the money tells the story louder than the noise. Kendrick Lamar's touring numbers this cycle have already outpaced the equivalent Drake touring cycle from 2023 by a documented margin. Kendrick Lamar's sync licensing income has quietly exploded because film and television houses are now aggressively bidding on GNX cuts. Kendrick Lamar's publishing arrangement is reportedly being renegotiated on terms industry lawyers are calling generational. And every single one of those revenue rivers runs parallel to a legal system that Drake is currently paying to fight instead of paying to build. One artist is compounding. The other is hemorrhaging. That is not an opinion. That is arithmetic. Peep the generational layer as well, because the teenagers are watching all of this in real time. The young rappers on the come-up in Chicago, Atlanta, Detroit, Newark, and the Bronx are not studying Drake anymore. They are studying Kendrick Lamar. They are studying his rollout discipline. They are studying his silent strategy. They are studying his refusal to swing back at every internet insult lobbed at his name. They are studying the way Kendrick Lamar constructed an empire without ever once begging the gatekeepers for permission. Drake used to be that blueprint. Drake has become the cautionary tale pinned to the wall of every studio where a 16-year-old is deciding what kind of career to build. Now peep the international chessboard, because that lane used to belong to Drake outright. Kendrick Lamar has quietly been booked for a run of European and Asian arena dates, and those tickets are moving at a velocity that industry veterans say they have not witnessed since the peak of the streaming boom. Drake used to own the global lane without contest. Drake used to be able to surface in Paris, Berlin, Tokyo, or Seoul with a guaranteed sellout attached to his name. Those days are finished. The last two international runs Drake routed underperformed against projection, and the same pattern is surfacing in the early numbers around the Iceman World Tour. There are serious whispers from inside the routing offices that the Iceman Tour is being quietly reshuffled to avoid a direct calendar collision with Kendrick Lamar. Read that again. The biggest touring machine of the last decade is allegedly moving dates to stay out of the blast radius of a man who has not even announced a tour. That is not strategy. That is shelter. And do not underestimate the symbolism sitting inside the DJ Dahi album itself. Black Boy Alternative is not a random title pulled from a hat. Black Boy Alternative is a thesis statement. Black Boy Alternative is Kendrick Lamar and DJ Dahi informing the industry that the old template for what a black artist is permitted to be inside this genre has been shattered, and that Kendrick Lamar is the alternative standing in its place. Drake spent an entire career performing an identity that never truly belonged to him. Kendrick Lamar spent an entire career refining an identity that could only ever belong to him. That is the actual divide underneath every chart number, every court filing, and every trophy count we have walked through tonight. Real talk, this is the convergence the culture has been waiting on since May of 2024. This is the moment where the receipts, the timeline, the awards, the film, the album, the hand wraps, the FaceTime call, the courtroom losses, and the streaming curves all finally align into a single unified argument. And that argument is simple enough to fit on one line. Kendrick Lamar has won. Drake has lost. The only question left is how loudly the industry is willing to say it out loud, because behind closed doors, that verdict was rendered months ago. The industry is simply waiting for August 28th to say it in public with the volume up. And one more layer before the verdict, because this piece ties the whole quilt together. Look at what silence has actually accomplished. While the entire industry spent the summer generating noise, Kendrick Lamar generated leverage. No interviews. No explanation tour. No defensive press run. Just a radio snippet on July 20th, a FaceTime call on July 31st, a feature confirmation on the calendar, and a pair of boxing raps that have been aging in the culture's memory like a signed promise. That is 4 moves in an entire summer, and those 4 moves have dominated more headlines than 3 full albums from the other side. Efficiency like that is not luck. Efficiency like that is doctrine. Kendrick Lamar understands something most artists never learn, which is that scarcity is the loudest marketing in the world. When you speak rarely, every word lands like a verdict. When you drop rarely, every record lands like an event. Drake flooded the zone and drowned his own signal. Kendrick Lamar rationed the signal and made the entire planet lean forward to hear it. 2 men. 2 philosophies. One of them is running a business, and the other one is running in place. And notice what the rest of the industry is doing while this plays out, because their behavior is the confession. Radio programmers are clearing late August slots. Playlist curators are holding premium real estate open for the 4th quarter like it is reserved seating. Producers who spent the last 2 years sending beats to Toronto are suddenly very interested in what Compton needs. That is the invisible scoreboard, the one that never gets posted on social media. The industry votes with its calendar long before it votes with its mouth, and right now the calendar is wearing Kendrick Lamar's colors from August straight through to December. When the infrastructure of an entire genre starts quietly rearranging itself around one man's release window, the argument is already over. The rest is just commentary. Drop your verdict in the comments right now, because I genuinely want to read where the culture lands on this. If you believe Kendrick Lamar has already sealed the greatest of all-time conversation, drop a crown emoji below. If you believe Drake still has one miracle sitting inside the Iceman project, drop a 6 emoji and defend it. And if you believe this 4th quarter is about to become the most brutal takeover in modern hip-hop history, drop an 8, because August 28th is the fuse and everybody in this comment section knows what happens after a fuse burns down. Tap the like button if this breakdown arranged the receipts the way you already suspected they would. Subscribe if you are new, because the next installment is going to peel the Whitney Springs strategy apart layer by layer, and you are going to want that notification the second it goes live. Because understand what August 28th actually represents. It is not the finish line. It is not even the halfway marker. It is the opening bell of a 4th quarter takeover, and the OVO camp already looks like a team that lost the plot 2 rounds ago. Kendrick Lamar has moved past the defensive phase of this war entirely. Kendrick Lamar is sitting in the offensive chair now, dictating the tempo of the entire genre while the other side drafts appeals. Drake is fighting a war in a courtroom. Kendrick Lamar is winning a war in the streets and on the charts at the exact same time. Every calculated play from Kendrick Lamar is engineered to reinforce a throne while making Drake look like he is still sitting at the audition table waiting for his name to be called. And once the smoke from this rollout clears, the industry is going to look at the calendar and realize Kendrick Lamar had already reserved every important date on it before anybody else even started planning. The boxing raps were the prophecy. The Grammy sweep was the coronation. How to Pray is the opening ceremony. DJ Dahi provided the Trojan horse. Amber Mark is the proof the bench keeps growing. Whitney Springs is the empire stretching past music. Gen X is the anchor that never left the charts. And every single one of those elements was placed in sequence, on purpose, by a man who has not raised his voice once. That is the scariest part of all of this for Toronto. Kendrick Lamar never had to scream. The culture screamed for him. And file this final observation away, because it explains everything else. Every era of this genre produces one artist who stops participating in the conversation and starts dictating it. That artist stops reacting to the news cycle and becomes the news cycle. Kendrick Lamar crossed that threshold somewhere between the pop-out concert and the Super Bowl stage, and nothing that has happened since, not the lawsuits, not the streams, not the memes, not the disattempts, has pulled him back across it. He is not inside the storm anymore. He is the weather system the storm reports to. That is why a single feature on another man's debut album can tilt the entire fourth quarter of this genre on its axis. That is why a snippet on a radio stream cannot muscle a full album rollout. That is why one photograph of a wrapped right hand can generate more genuine anticipation than $100 million of conventional promotion. Kendrick Lamar has become the reference point every other career in this space is now measured against, willingly or not, and measurements like that do not get revoked by appeals. So here's where we land. Circle August 28th in red ink, and do not let anything move you off that date. Kendrick Lamar is standing in the center of the ring, gloves laced, wraps tight, timer ticking, and Drake is still wandering the arena trying to figure out which corner the fight is even happening in. The bell is about to ring. And when it does, the culture is going to hear one name echoing off the walls of every arena, every studio, every barbershop, every city block, and every algorithmic feed on the planet. Kendrick Lamar. That is the name. That is the era. That is the knockout. Circle the date, lock in, and whatever you do, do not blink, because history has already shown us exactly what happens to the people who look away when Kendrick Lamar starts moving, and none of them are standing where they used to stand. I will be right here with the first full breakdown the second How to Pray touches the timeline, and trust me when I tell you this, you are going to want to be right here in this comment section the moment it does, because the conversation that night is going to be the one everyone quotes for the rest of the year.